Hello everyone, welcome to Dice on Ice. My name is Megan.
And my name is Connor.
So, we're going to be... Are you done?
If only.
Oh no. Stop! Just let me speak. So in this series, we want to give tips, tricks, and advice for players and DMs alike. We're going to be talking mostly about Dungeons & Dragons, but a lot of our advice can be used for other tabletop RPGs. We want to make these videos quick and succinct so that you can get as much information as you can in as short amount of time as possible. With that being said, our first video is 5 ways to make your D&D character seem more real.
So wait, did you say make your character seem more real? Because if that's the case, I've got a point I'd like to bring up. The first point I'd like to bring up in making your D&D characters feel more real is to give them kind of these flaws and quirks to really bring out a three-dimensional personality.
That was a great segue.
You know what else is a great segue? Flaw is a negative personality trait. Something that sets you back, holds you back, stops you from being the person you should be, stops you from doing the things you want to do, and overall makes your life a much more miserable thing.
It has an impact.
It does.
On your life, very significantly, whether that is negative, but it's mostly negative.
It is. That's why it's a flaw.
So what is a quirk?
A quirk is something small, not insignificant, but definitely strange or different about your character. Something that sets them apart from others.
An example might be twirling your hair, biting your nails when you're nervous.
Or even just taking your hat off when you enter someone else's home.
These are things that make you, as a person, unique. No one else has the same combination of quirks and flaws as you do. So flaws are very important to have in your character. It immediately gives them a background. It immediately gives them depth. It makes it seem like they didn't just run into the story, appear out of thin air.
With no drawbacks and no qualms and no history to them.
The thing with a flaw, you have to think about ways that you can implement that flaw into your role-playing. And look at it and think of how your character with this flaw, with this quirk, would react in the situation. I find that a flaw always has to deal with the character's background. A quirk, not necessarily. Some people might have quirks that don't have anything to do with their background or their life. It's just something that makes them them. But a flaw will always have something to do with their background.
The second point we like to bring up when you're making a character seem more real is to leave room to grow. Now, we don't mean that from a character advancement perspective or even a personality advancement perspective. No, we actually mean like just in the sheer number of details you have about your character. Keep it simple. Keep it brief.
I can count. I can count.
She can count, ladies and gentlemen.
I cannot count the number of times that I've gone onto Google when I'm making a character sheet or making up a character.
You find these online quizzes with 100 questions, these long questionnaires with questions ranging from what's their favorite kind of chocolate, what's their shoe size, what is their grandmother's maiden name.
I just got discouraged when I would answer all of these questions, and oftentimes when I went to play the game, these questions didn't really come up. They weren't really pertinent. And I've also seen it where people have become so rigid in their character's backstory that they are unable to meld in with the other players. It now becomes the GM's job to implement this stuff that's already in there so rigidly into their game. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't have ideas, but just make sure that they're vague enough so that they can easily meld into what the GM and the other players have in mind.
When you're making your character, think of these things as building blocks that all of the people at the table can use to build a story.
We feel like your character can be summed up in about 10 points.
That's a lot of points, but consider this. They're just bullet points.
Barely even sentences.
The first 3 are your character's backstory. You can think of them as beginning, middle, and end. The first one is their origin. Where did they come from? What was their day-to-day life like when they were younger or not an adventurer? The second point, the middle of this thing, is some grand event, some big thing that shook it all up, that really turned their life upside down. The last point is the ending. What happened in the last few moments leading up to the beginning of the campaign? How did they become an adventurer? Why did they leave the entirety of their life behind?
The next 5 points are actually in the 5th edition of the D&D Player's Handbook. We just feel that they do an excellent job of really succinctly coming together with your character's personality.
Yeah, that being 2 personality traits, 1 bond, 1 ideal, and 1 flaw.
And to that flaw, add a quirk.
Or 2. And I think this leads us to our third point, alignment.
I can feel the judgment.
I can feel all those thumbs downs just appearing. The alignment is bad. And I can also see the alignment is very good.
You must do alignment.
You must always have alignment. It's an important cosmological factor. We understand both sides of this argument thoroughly.
We are here to say alignment is a guideline, not the rule. Alignment is an interesting thing. It can fuel a lot of good ideas for your character, where your character lies in terms of what they think, how they feel about certain things.
Yeah, the good and evil, chaos and law spectrum. It's a tool. It's a good tool that you can use to figure out, again, how your character might react to a certain situation. Right? Do they value people? Do they value rules? Do they value others? Do they value themselves? These are things you have to think about your character.
However, evil characters can do good things. And good characters can
still do heinous deeds.
Absolutely. This is where the guideline of alignment comes in.
They're still people. They can still break from their own molds a bit.
We all have our values. We all have what we think about the big picture of things. But our little actions fall above and below our value. And it's kind of the average that's taken that kind of determines how we are generally as people. You can do good things. You can do bad things in times of need. And being good is all about perspective.
There are many dilemmas that pop up in gaming and alignment where you're given a goblin infant. What do you do with this goblin infant? Do you treat it as a monster because it will grow up to be a monster and thus deal with it as you should deal with a monster? Or do you deal with it as an infant should be dealt with care and nurturing and respect, thinking that it'll grow up to be a decent being because you've raised it to be a decent being? These are both arguably good things. One might say it is good to eradicate the world of evil creatures such as goblins. Another person might say it is good to raise and care and love others and give them the respect that they may or may not even deserve.
The world is not black and white. In the same way, RP in a game should reflect the real world in its grayness.
This brings us to our fourth point in how to make your characters seem more real, being to get your inspiration from real people.
This seems kind of like a obvious point, but a lot of people have this weird fantastical view of their heroes.
Think of all your favorite movie characters. Think of all your favorite people in stories and books you've read. They have their own flaws, quirks, bonds, traits, ideals.
The Avengers, pop culture reference right here. They are not perfect, though they are super.
They are heroic and super. They are everything a D&D character wants to be, but they have their own flaws.
Now, the inspiration from real people is a great way to get that very interesting look of how to create your player.
It also helps you when you're role-playing. If you're ever stuck on how would they act, you can imagine this person, instead of your character, in that spot. Maybe you're basing this cleric off of your grandmother and how she's very kind and all the things that your grandmother is. You can just close your eyes and think, what would my grandmother do? And voila, you have how your character would act. And that just gives you kind of an anchoring or a grounding point if you're lost for ideas.
It's tough to come up with ideas on the fly when you're playing and there's so many other forces there. It's important to come up with little tips and tricks to make it easier and to make your role-playing experience better. The other thing is you can come up with tons of quirks, tons of flaws when you base your characters off of people you know.
People that you meet on the bus, people that you know from your jobs or school. Those people can be interesting bases. Bases, who knows how English works. Interesting bases for how your characters act or behave or even are.
So just take a moment and look at people.
Watch people on the bus.
Observe them. Just don't be creepy about it.
Not too creepy, but creepy enough so they don't wonder what you're doing.
So they leave you alone.
So they leave you alone and let you play your weird nerd game in peace.
This brings us to our last point, and I use this all the time, and I find it actually very difficult to make my character seem more real if I don't have this.
What is this?
This is find a picture of your character.
Or even draw it if you have that artistic ability to draw your character out. When you find this picture, you can use things like Google or other search places you can search for images.
Pinterest is a fantastic place. It is not just for mason jars and weird twinkly lights.
And home decorations. You can use it to find a bunch of fantasy art. These things can inspire a character because you know what the adage is.
Adage?
Adage.
You mean the adage?
It's adage. It's a French word.
Okay, what is the adage?
The adage is that a picture contains approximately 994 words. Round up to 1,000. A picture has roughly 1,000 words in it.
What we mean by that is pay attention to their facial expressions, their stance.
What they're wearing, what the things that are on their belt are. These things can be important to them. What are they? Why does she have so many flasks around her belt? Is she worried about coming across many poisons? Is she exploring a dangerous jungle that you can't see in the picture?
Or is she just a drunk?
Are those just liquors? Are those her favorite beverages? Are those things that she wants to give out to her other party members? Are they healing potions? Is she a caring, nurturing person? You can just come up with these things as you observe and look at the details of a picture.
So we hope you liked our first video. We recorded this video a few times with some technical difficulties, so this is our first video, and so please give us a little bit of leniency, but we hope that you really got some good information from this.
If you found this video helpful, hopefully our video can help you earn inspiration by acting out your character in cool ways.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment and tell us what you think about it.
And with that being said, Megan, take us, the Crifoth, out of here.